This is the story of a nurse that decided to come to the house and give Dad a annual examination. Now, this examination is not what you want to call your get naked and stand up and that kind of thing. This is just a come in and do a few minor things to find out if he's okay. So she shows up and she goes to the dining room table and she decides that she's going to take his socks off and, prick him in the bottom of his feet. Do you feel this? Do you feel that? Oh, yeah. So Dad is starting to get accustomed to this gal all of a sudden, and he decides that what he's going to do is he's got a new person he can talk to and who's going to pay attention to him. He's excited about that. So what he's doing is he's talking to them. He's going off into Never Never Land with stories about when he grew up in Canada and where he was born and how his life was in Flint, Michigan. And of course, the gal, she doesn't care anything about all this stuff. She just wants to get in and get out. So she asks him this question: when was the last time you saw a doctor? Now, I'm sitting on the other side of the room, minding my own business. And I told the nurse when she first came in, I said, look, I'm not going to interrupt you guys. I'm going to let Dad answer the questions because he's the one who wants to answer the questions and he's the one who wants to tell you the answer. He doesn't want me speaking for him. He really gets irritated if he thinks I'm speaking for him. So I'm not going to do that, okay? So she said that was fine. So every time she would ask a question, she'd look over me to see if that was the right answer or not, if she was getting the right answer. So he said, when is the last time you saw a doctor? And he's thinking. And of course, he will ask me multiple times a day, what day is it? So for him to think back to the last time he saw a doctor isn't going to happen. So he fumbles around, turns around, looks at me, when's the last time I was at a doctor? And I got to thinking to myself, well, let's see. We've been down here since September of 14, and here we are in 17. It's almost 3 years. We haven't seen a doctor yet. So the last time in Indianapolis we saw a doctor was probably when you got your knees done, 2007. So he turns around and he says to her, 2007. And she looks over at me and she looks at him and she said, you need to see a doctor on a regular basis. And Dad says, I do see a doctor on a regular basis, once every 10 years. So as the activity continues with this nurse, she gets down to the last thing she wants him to do, and that's sign the paperwork. And so she says, I want you to sign right here. So Dad says, well, I was born in Canada, and my mother called me Ronnie, come here, Ronnie. And so Ronnie was his name, Ronald. So he given 4 names, George, Ronald, William, Duncan. I'm not sure how you want me to sign that. When I went to work for Allison Division of General Motors, they asked me my name and my legal name. And I said, well, I've George, Ronald, William, Duncan. So they said, well, George, Ronald, William, Duncan, we'll call you George R. Duncan. And so sign it, George. So Ronnie became George when he joined Allison Division of General Motors. And so he's going through this long story with the nurse about how he should sign his name on her paper. And he says to her, how do you want me to sign it? And she finally says, I don't care how you sign it. You can sign it Mickey Mouse for all I care. And that was the end of the visit.